This from last Wednesday just gone, from the important debate initiated by the Honourable Ben Dawkins, independent member of the Legislative Council here in Western Australia.
As government, really can't make decisions, emergency decisions, through the prism of single issues or indeed individual circumstances. We have to take all factors on board, consider them, and then do what's right for the collective community. And you know, that's a tough. You can sit there and smile and laugh. You weren't here. You weren't here in this place when we were making these decisions. In this place, you weren't here.
Order.
I
Order, members. Order.
I have empathy. How dare you?
Order, members.
Absolutely.
Order. The Deputy Leader of the House.
I mean, honourable members can sit and smirk and smile or laugh in this place, but the fact is we made tough decisions to keep people alive in Western Australia. And I said 7 to 14, 15 million people around the world died. That did not happen in Western Australia. While we lost people, and every life is tragic, we didn't see the death and devastation in this state that other places had. And that's as a result of people in this place, on all sides of the chamber, taking the issue seriously and voting sometimes late at night, on laws that we thought could keep people alive, that we thought could keep people safe, that we thought could keep the economy going at the time. All those things were under consideration.
It's not replying to every other argument.
Okay, I'll sit down. I'm ending now. All I'm saying is, next time, and this should be part of that, is we get it better and we find employment laws that enable people to make their own choices, not be sacked.
Members, the question is the order, members. There should be no interruption from the public gallery, and I just give a general warning to the public gallery that the debate should be heard in silence. The question is that the words to be inserted be inserted. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you.
So isn't it funny when you hear now Stephen Dawson, the WA Labor Emergency Services Minister, saying that governments can't make decisions on single issues, or as he now says,
or indeed individual circumstances.
That when you look at this, when he and his partner, Dennis Littlelow, flew to Canberra to participate in the same-sex act marriage, and that, or the act of marriage, which was a same-sex marriage, that at the time when marriage wasn't legal in Western Australia, as opposed to the collective community, because they were opposed to Stephen Dawson's individual circumstance. There is a long record of Stephen Dawson campaigning individualism, calling for the West Australian government to make a decision that advances his single issue in the same manner that Honourable Ben Dawkins is campaigning for now, for those whose voices have been ignored by many parliamentarians, that the West Australian government policies during the pandemic have caused harm. This is another News for Your live stream brought to you by Freedom Media WA, and in this stream I'm going to bring you the same interview which I brought the other day with the Honourable Ben Dawkins after the debate in Parliament on Wednesday, but with a change. I understand many of you may have already seen that interview. What is different with this stream is so as to provide better context to some of the questions that I asked Ben Dawkins and to provide context to some of his responses. I've been through the full 2.5-hour parliamentary debate and inserted what you need to hear. With that, I'll press play. Feel free to add your comments as we go through, and I'll do my best to respond in the background and come back and sign off on the stream.
Good afternoon, Lindsay from Freedom Media, WA, and we are here in the gardens of West Australian Parliament. Of course, standing next to me is the Honourable Ben Dawkins, who has just participated in his debate. We did come down earlier to cover that, but we've actually sat in the public gallery throughout the debate. Ben, I guess initially a tough gig, 20 minutes to get these issues through. How do you feel overall?
I feel a little bit disappointed just in myself, obviously all the stories that I've had, and being able to get that across is not as easy as I thought it might be. And yes, I apologise to those people if I wasn't able to get their story in, or if I wasn't really able to get the essence of what they were saying or what they wanted from this. And also disappointed just because the performance of, say for example, the Liberal Party, Steve Thomas.
To bring this debate back before the House, not the motion. The motion itself is fine. Like I say, you should have moved this motion and then sat down, because it was everything after you moved the motion that was the problem.
They're deliberately not getting the point. I mean, in the end, my point, we all agreed on damage from vaccines, injuries. Everyone agreed on that.
It is absolutely the case that people were negatively impacted by the COVID-19 vaccination program and by the restrictions. That is absolutely true.
And there are documents on all government websites about that. And so that issue is going to unfold further, I think, through the courts and through the compensation schemes. But my specific point was about being sacked for not taking a vaccine, and how that is an unacceptable infringement of a person's individual liberties.
And the vaccine mandates, which we then got. So we were told that COVID-19 vaccine would stop transmission of disease and prevent death. Now, neither of these statements is true. Neither of these statements is true. Now, I questioned the Chief Medical Officer on this, and he refused to give details to me in this very House, claiming his advice was cabinet in confidence. Trust the doctor, we're told. But the government's response was based on information which was not correct, were predicated on the truth of these claims, which have been proved to be false. And so people have lost not just confidence in the system because of this manifest incorrect statement, but also people lost their livelihoods, their homes, because of their refusal to abide by what we now know were false assumptions.
Or being forced to get the vaccine, which they didn't want to take.
Some people, unfortunately, get reasonably severe reactions to them. That's the group of people that should be identified by their GP and provided with an exemption that was available to the community.
But I had problems in reporting COVID-19 vaccine reactions. It was actually quite difficult, and it was made very clear to me I was an unpopular doctor. So if that is the case for me, and I'm sure for others as well, it's probably true to say that the actual relative risk of COVID vaccination in our city, in our country just now, is probably incorrect, because the levels of reporting adverse reactions is not 100%. And this, I think, is of immense concern. Am I alone in this?
With a threat of being sacked, either one. That's where it's unacceptable, and this is what the Liberals and obviously the government just wouldn't accept. They say it's okay to sack people.
Now, there was an opportunity for people not to take that risk going forward, and you could refuse. There was a jobs mandate. Because
everything turned out all right in the end. That's not true. Those people's lives are individually affected forever now, their careers, and those who took it, who didn't want to take it.
See, this is a simple case. It is if the individual rights of a person to not vaccinate themselves is important, so are the individual rights of everybody else. Otherwise, it is a very selfish argument. Otherwise, you put yourself and what you want well in front of everybody else in the community. Everybody else.
Their health, potentially, if they had an adverse event.
Yep.
And for Steve Thomas to say, oh, well, everyone has to take the risk of an adverse event for the greater good.
The risk of vaccination that we all take, that small, tiny level of threat, is our gift to the people who surround us. It is our gift to the population of Australia, particularly those vulnerable people. It is our gift. We take that on that small risk to protect the people for whom the risk is much greater.
That's not how individual or medical ethics work. I mean, everyone has their own risk profile, and so you decide if you want to take that risk of an adverse event. And people weren't given the choice and were sacked if they didn't do it. So I just think it's an outrageous misunderstanding on behalf of all of those people in there. And what I will say to you at home is, if you think you're smarter than people in Parliament, that's because you are. Because they're absolutely low level of representation.
But the contribution of the Honourable Ben Dawkins was entirely about the arguments around the efficiency and the effectiveness of the vaccines. So it is of no benefit to the state or the Parliament or the people for that debate to be paramount amongst all the other debates that occurred.
I'm going to pick up, excuse my flicking through here, a couple of notes and that I made. As you touched, Sue Ellery did say she was very clear with this.
How do you weigh up the interests of the individual that the Honourable Ben Dawkins has talked about? And I don't agree with him. I don't think that the right of the individual should supersede the common good for everybody. I think it should be the other way around.
And she said that. Steve Dawson from the Liberal Party also said that.
The Honourable Ben Dawkins also talked very much about the individual rights of autonomy. And I thought that was really interesting, because what became blatantly apparent in his contribution is that the individual rights of those members of the community who did not want to be vaccinated, obviously, in his argument, far outweigh the individual rights of the people who catch COVID or die from COVID or get seriously sick from COVID.
And
you're having trouble with your names today. So it was Kate Dowse from the Labor Party and Steve Thomas from the Liberal Party.
Thank you. Yep, thank you. We couldn't see those speakers.
Oh, okay.
Yep, so we couldn't see them. So that's why. But coming back to what you said, I mean, one of the comments, why in God's name did we sack people for maintaining body autonomy? That point alone was very clearly missed from the Labor Party and also Liberal.
But the contribution of the Honourable Ben Dawkins was entirely about the arguments around the efficiency and the effectiveness of the vaccines. So it is of no benefit to the state or the Parliament or the people for that debate to be paramount amongst all the other debates.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my biggest disappointments, was deliberately overlooking. So how do you sort of advance an argument in a chamber where there's no actual responsibility to listen or respond meaningfully? Because you can make the same point and all they do is deflect onto, well, isn't it great that we had a positive outcome overall? That's not the point. The point was whose rights were trampled on in the meanwhile, whose health has been affected in the meanwhile through coercion, and whose careers have been destroyed. Where this government thinks that it's acceptable to sack people because they're refusing a vaccine for their own, what I say are valid reasons, that's what this has really come down to, is how arrogant this Parliament is about those individual people, and it's just a complete lack of empathy. See, there's a fine line between choice and coercion in this case.
But what you did in your contribution is you picked this one small group, some of whom are still friends of mine who refused to get vaccinated, who are still very angry. Some of them who lost their jobs, who are still very angry. You're right, that small group is angry, and you can plug into them all you like. But that's not going to continue your political career, despite your best efforts. You're actually better off to put an application back in for membership of the Labor Party, in my view. You might stand a better chance.
Because if like Julie, who I spoke on behalf of has a specialised career, 23 years doing that particular thing, that job opportunity doesn't exist for her anymore because someone else has taken it after she was removed from that position due to refusing the mandate. So to gloss over them and just point to the overall outcomes in this state is just a manifest failure to appreciate what individual freedoms are all about. And I just don't think the Liberal Party's in any position, given that they're supposed to care about those things, they're in any position to recover from where they are, which is in the toilet at the moment with the number of members they have at the moment. They're not going to recover if their leaders don't even understand what's supposed to be liberal ideology. I mean, That's why I say this place is a joke.
Well, and you mentioned that some of the people in the place are a bit of a joke. From where we were seated, we were able to have a very clear view of Kyle McGill, who represents mining and pastoral, a very, very large electorate, important electorate. Now, you would expect, whilst he didn't participate in your debate and he had nothing to say in relation to that, that he would use on the public purse his time constructively and perhaps answer some parliamentary emails, emails from his constituents. But he sat there, and it would have surprised you to know that he looked at Facebook and TikTok videos on how to season chicken nuggets coming out of an air fryer, on the ultimate cage fighting. He is rather partial to watching videos there. How to make a custom-made lacquered chessboard. I sat and watched for nearly 4 minutes while he watched that video, and also unboxing Superman suits from TikTok and doing immediate transportations. I mean, that is the calibre of the person of Kyle McGill, who's sitting there whilst you're on your feet, whilst Wilson Tucker's on his feet, whilst Dr. Brian Walker's on the feet. In fact, even his own party, who did say that they agree that this has caused harm, if that's the most important thing that he can do in his day, I guess from my observations, and I'm sure many that would get an understanding of what I've just said then, would be absolutely appreciative of you generating and tabling this motion, Ben.
I'll try my best.
And that's how he used his time. Would that surprise you?
No. The prosecution rests. I mean, this is what I was saying before. It's not that crash hot in here, guys. So nominate for Parliament, set up a political party, do something.
At least there was a crack there, I guess. A comment Wilson Tucker came out and said.
But we have seen some recent examples where we know that the government isn't perfect, and the Aboriginal cultural heritage legislation is certainly an example of that. And I feel there are better outcomes that are achieved for the West Australian public when the government takes ownership over poor decision making and owns those decisions rather than trying to obfuscate or really tries to, cover up those decisions. Really,
and there were some bad decisions which you were looking to highlight there. And that we do need to talk about these.
But this needs to be amped up now, and also the review of things like I say, never again should nurses and police, for example, lose their jobs simply for wanting to maintain their own bodily autonomy. So that was my main, and that comes to employment law. We need to change the employment law so that they can't say choosing not to have a vaccine because of your own individual circumstance is a failure to abide by a lawful and reasonable order, which is what it is in employment law. And that's the argument that the police commissioner and others have been running for sacking perfectly good policemen. It's like that point didn't get anywhere. And that's a positive point because I'm talking about improving it for next time.
Yeah.
Improving it for our kids so that we don't operate in this authoritarian way, and people's right to be employed in their profession, which they know and are needed to do for our, like in the case of police, for the safety of the society, that they're still allowed to make those choices, not to get a vaccine and retain their job. I mean, it just seems so obvious, but we need to change the laws on that.
And I think it's been I'm sure, quite a hectic morning for you prepping for that, so I won't keep you much longer. I do just want to touch, you mentioned the immunisation or the Commonwealth compensation scheme. You pointed out that you couldn't ask a question of the representative of the Minister of Health because there was no representative there, but you did ask the question, is the government, or what level of support is the West Australian government seeking from the Commonwealth for this, which is telling in itself. If they are seeking further support from the Commonwealth for vaccinated compensation, then that means they know there's a problem. Would you agree with that?
Yes, they know there's a problem, and it's just failure to recognise it in explicit terms in the Parliament, which is my disappointment that people think that by not elevating these issues in Parliament, they think they're doing a good job for their party or for Mr McGowan or Mr Cook. But really, it's just showing that they have a very shallow understanding of and a lack of empathy for the people out in the community. I mean, I thought last time I checked, I thought we were supposed to speak on behalf of people that contact us.
I can tell you that your what would you call it, your allocated seat there, it was absolutely covered with just reams and reams of information, and I was, watching you just in awe, I guess, of trying to piece all that together to get some of those stories, because you've been inundated with that. And yet I look down directly again, Kyle McGill, and watch him watching these, cage fightings. So much so that he had to go and borrow Pierre Yang's charger to keep his phone going. But then I look down and all he had is one piece of paper, and it's, it really is a sad. I mean, that Kate Dowse, if it was her that stood up and said, talked about her vaccine status. It was never about that.
And I'm happily vaccinated now 5 times. I very eagerly stick out an arm and say, give me the needle that I need, because I don't want to get ill.
It was about, as you say, people's inalienable rights and
inalienable, yeah. I like that word, and it's a legal word, and also.
The idea of mandating would have been a significant decision for this government to take. And that then leads me into this question around the mandated issue of vaccinations. I know that I reacted extremely badly to my first vaccination, knocked me out for a few days.
People could have been dealt with differently, respectful of their decision not to be vaccinated.
Which is what you were talking about the whole time. So I think on that note, I'm getting eaten by mosquitoes here. They're coming out of the bushes. Ben Dawkins, thank you very much for your time, and those that have commented as well. So just a quick update. So for myself, Lindsay from Freedom Media WA, Clayton behind the camera, and Ben Dawkins, good afternoon.
So there you go. There was a lot to get through in that, as I said at the beginning of this package, and I think there may have been a few double ups there. I did have a little bit of an issue trying to edit out the package, and I'm actually playing it behind the scenes straight off the computer in the editor, so I apologise for that, but I think you get the point. As I said, many comments, and I've just popped in extracts to explain why I was asking the questions I was asking and why Ben Dawkins was answering in the manner that he was. But you can get a clear sense there that the opposition leader in the Legislative Council, Steve Thomas, that he really didn't get a lot of that, and I've been seeing your comments coming through on the side. That's the purpose of doing that. I was considering restreaming the whole parliamentary debate. Of course, people have said by now they've put links to do that, and anybody's free to go and watch that. There was some parts that were a little bit lackluster in the debate, and I really just felt that it's perhaps no point in doing so, and just wanted to put in those particular points that I've just brought you, that really shows the mindset of the WA Labor Parliament here in Western Australia, and surprisingly, the opposition in the Liberal Conservative mindset of where they stand in relation to this particular matter. Of course, not all of the WA Liberal Party are of that mindset, and what wasn't in that package that I will just make mention of now before I sign off on the stream, and that is that the Honourable Nick Goren was paired out, meaning that because to keep the balance of the numbers, he unfortunately drew the short straw, which meant that he had to sit out in that. And there is no doubt in my mind that the Honourable Nick Goren would have added tremendous amount of value in relation to that particular parliamentary debate. Wasn't to happen in this case. Just speaking on that, I am also working on bringing a stream, hopefully tomorrow, if not Monday morning, about a really fiery exchange. And the Honourable Nick Goren certainly has the government on a particular issue on the back foot. And yeah, I'm really sort of excited to bring that particular piece there, because I just sat in absolute awe just watching Nick Goren just go question after question and rebuttal after rebuttal from WA Labor, and they just didn't stack up. They didn't have the goods. Nick Goren certainly caught them absolutely wanting in this, so much so, well, I'm not going to reveal it. I'm going to be bringing you that stream hopefully tomorrow, if not Monday. But it is an evening here. I did see Richard. Just a quick shout out, I guess, Richard and Terry. I know Terry is watching over in Queensland. Thank you, Terry, for your support. We couldn't do what you've done. You've certainly been generous in buying us some coffees here, which we have put to some new equipment. There's always a need for that, and we've got an exciting new piece which we haven't deployed yet, but we're waiting to do that in the field. And Richard, of course, Richard is watching all the way over in Bonnie, Scotland, and certainly Richard has, I guess, not revealing too much here, but he does have family over here in Western Australia, and you know, we exchange messages privately, and Richard is also keeping up the good fight over there on the exact same issues that we're finding here. So I think that is about it for me on this evening. Patricia, thank you very much, you know, for your comments there. It takes a lot to put these packages together, a lot of time. I've spent most of the day doing this and had a little bit of an issue, hence the reason, as I said, I had to play it off on the back-end computer to bring it to you. So a lot happening, of course. West Australian Parliament, there is only another, they sit again on the 28th of November. And now I'm just trying to think, I've got a bit of a brain freeze here, that whether it's 1 week or 2 weeks, it would be certainly no more than 2. And of course, then they rise, as they say in parliamentary terms, and they aren't back for some near 3 months. So there will be plenty of opportunity, hopefully, to be able to bring you some other key interviews from those. We are reaching out to a number of people. We see the comments that come forward, particularly off YouTube. Some people saying that you know, that we're censoring. We're not. If anything's censored, it's done by YouTube, except if you post a link on Facebook that just simply doesn't post. We send out invitations to both the WA Labor and also Liberal and these parties here. What we're going to do now is start showing the emails that we send forward and the replies, if we get them, but what replies we do get, to say we're quite happy to talk to anybody that wants to talk on this viewpoint, so that people can understand and get insight as to how and why the government of the day here in Western Australia has made their decisions. But sadly, they certainly don't want to have these conversations. It will come as no surprise. On that note, I'm going to sign off and say, wherever you find yourself, enjoy the rest of your evening. Good evening.
Brought to you by Freedom Media WA, where journalism should never be a government narrative.